Hey everybody, it is Vinny from Proguides, and I am here to discuss a divine gameplay that a viewer sent in. Recently we've been analyzing parts of professional matches, and in general we're going to be using pro level pub games for our videos, but today is different. We're going to look at this viewer's divine gameplay to show the difference between good players and the top players. Speaking of the top players, I would like your opinions on that today. Which team is the strongest team in the world right now? Before recent tournaments, I'm sure everybody would have said Secret or OG, but has anyone's opinions changed with recent events? The match we're going to showcase here is a 5k MMR pub played on EU West. I'm going to go through the laning stage, mid-game rotations, and some team fights. Starting off with this laning stage, let's look at these starting items. Just from taking a peek at every player on Dire, it's pretty much only Zeus and Jakiro with weird item builds, while on Radiant, everyone except for Mars has items that make sense overall, even if they could be better. Starting with the Mars player, he's got lots of regen and a quelling blade. This tells me he wants to focus on farming the early levels, but he's against a Morphling, where he should be taking the opposite approach. I'd say maybe drop the quelling blade altogether and either go just a full bracer or an orb of venom maybe. For the Jakiro, this build is really bad, including he's got no salve in lane with a Morphling, has clarities over mangoes as your starting regen, and he's got a Windlace in a matchup where Windlace is really going to help very little. He could have gone a number of different builds, but overall he needs to play super aggressive level 1 to cover up for his Morphling's weaknesses, but he's not going to be able to do that with these items. And then we have the Zeus with 3 mangoes, clarity, and some null talisman components. My gripe with this is that he's got no health sustain or movement speed. Position 4s are usually foregoing a lot of health regen if they don't intend to trade hits, because they're going to be faster but maybe weaker than their laning counterparts. So they want to mess with the creep wave, block camps, and this guy intends to trade as a Zeus. He also took Lightning Bolt level 1, which is another mistake in 99% of situations, but he's got no regen to back up the trading game plan. That's weird to me. Alright, quickly let's review these early minutes to see how the item builds affected the laning stage. In top lane, we can see right away that there are some correct ideas with what should happen from both sides, but neither seems to have the proper manner to execute that. The Dire side duo is not afraid to trade, but they aren't zoning out the Morphling well enough, which will make their lane much harder in a few minutes because Morphling scales super hard with those multiple levels and attribute shift. On Radiant's end, Jakiro seemingly knows he has to be aggressive to get the attention away from the Morphling, but he's caught out of position and now he's got no salve to play the lane, which is sabotaging both of their games. On the bottom lane, right as the game starts, Zeus walks up to the Oracle to trade, but then just backs right off, not actually trading properly. Problem here is he's letting his offlaner get destroyed, so he's just watching here on the side lanes while the offlaner is getting blown to bits, giving away first blood. Not only is he out of mana after doing this movement, but the laning stage is just kind of a disaster now because the Zeus didn't properly utilize his HP for this move. He totally baited his offlaner. He gets a pull here at 217, and thank God for that, but let's be honest, this lane is already pretty bad enough that it's on Radiant to throw it, not on Dire to win it at this point. I won't talk too much about mid since it's a matchup where both sides just trade farm. Overall, it's going to be a passive lane. Things to look out for are the power runes, and we'll see what happens when Pugna hits level 6. Here at around 3.5, when the first rotation should be happening in most games, it's overwhelmingly the position 4 is going to be securing power runes for their mid laner. Neither side does do this, but at least Willow on the Radiant has an excuse because leaving Morphling alone early on will probably end up in losing their lane. But this Zeus is pretty much doing nothing in this lane for his Sand King anyway, so he really should just go ahead and secure that rune, and Sand King is very independent and I'm sure he'll be fine without him. Next timing to look out for is here at 5-minute bounties, and while at the top lane there is a fight breaking out right beforehand to decide who gets the securing of the rune at the end of the day, the bottom lane seems to have completely forgotten about them, so no one is even there to pick it up initially. Eventually, the Oracle does come here and get the bounty runes, but why didn't this just happen earlier? You gotta be really watching those clocks. That's the number one difference between the best players and average players. They utilize that clock constantly. So here at 6 minutes, it's the same deal for the power runes, but this time Willow is free to move since Morphling is very strong at this point and he shouldn't really be able to die. This means she can turn her attention to other lanes since the Morphling is going to be unkillable, or you could just go to the jungle and hard stack the Ancients for this PA. Stacks. I'm glad we started talking about stacks because there's something to be said about these Dire supports. If you look at the Dire cores, you got 3 heroes that once they have levels are all self-sufficient. Lifestealer pretty much right away, Morphling from level 5 onward, and Sand King probably level 5 onward in this game as well. So because of this, the Dire supports should be free to just roam the map however they want. That's a big deal and it should be exploited, but both supports seem to be tied down to their lanes for way too long. Big mistake from both Zeus and Jakiro here. Zeus could be stacking their triangle and Jakiro could be stacking their own jungle to give this Morphling and Sand King a much faster E-Blade or Blink or whatever they want. Heck, they could even just stack for themselves and be super high level supports with an early item. Either of them could smoke mid and kill this Pugna, I bet, in this matchup. Jakiro could go bottom, pressure PA as well, to get the tower maybe with Liquid Fire. There's so many plays to be made, but both of them are just sitting in lane, not capitalizing on anything. A great example of how static supports are and how hurtful that can be is at 845. Lifestealer messes up and he dies, but it was avoidable by a support rotation. Either of them can simply take over mid and get farm and Lifestealer would go and hit the jungle, or they could have TP'd in to save him. Even if they don't have preemptive moves to make while reading the game, they could at the very least TP mid after he dies to hold this tower, but instead Pugna takes their mid tower for free at 9 minutes into the game, which at higher levels that's potentially a game-losing mistake from your supports. Yes, you could say Lifestealer shouldn't have died in the first place, but hey, he's got a rough time clearing against Pugna's push, and, you know, what are we doing? Pointing fingers? That's not what we're trying to do here. Regardless of your teammates' mistakes, you should still be making the best plays. Similarly, when PA is zoned out of her lane on the Radiant side after repeated mistakes overextending into the Sandstorm, the Mars, who can't do anything to Morphling anymore, should just TP bottom and defend this tower. The Willow would also go bottom and leave Mars top to farm if the PA refuses to leave this bad lane. Overall, the tower fell way too easily here too. If it hasn't happened already, at minute 10 you'll usually see some big rotations to attempt to take some tier 1s. Pugna already took the mid tower though, so now he heads to the top lane along with Oracle. This is a nice and coordinated attempt, but Pugna and Oracle duo should have been smoked to make this gank less obvious. A better Morphling player could have TP'd away to farm as soon as he sees these 3 heroes at minute 10. Why else would 3 heroes be here? Regardless, the Morphling dies to this anyway, but the Sand King TP's top to hold the lane along with Zeus. Amazing reaction, and this makes Dire's game much easier than it would have been had this tower fallen. Not long afterward, however, the Sand King overextends and feeds, giving up his safe lane tower for free. On the other hand, while all that is happening up top, the Lifestealer takes the Radiant mid T1 for free as well. Willow shows up to defend too late. I'm going to blame most of this on the PA here. If your team is grouped as 4 pushing a tower and you see most of the enemy team, well, it's up to you to be pushing out a lane and defending your tower. You know, within reason, safely, but you gotta be not jungling. Overall, these players sporadically have good ideas about what can be done in the laning stage. They generally understand laning and hero mechanics, but pretty much nobody except for the Pugna or Oracle had a good understanding of where they should be on the map at what time and why. Next, I'll look at some team fights to showcase that not all is bad and these players are at least divine for a reason. The first bigger fight starts as a gank at Morphling at 14 minutes. Let's break this down to the good and the bad. So the bad, they do this without a smoke, so unless Dire has total potato warding, this is going to be a disaster most likely, and they haven't found any D wards recently. But fortunately for them, Dire's wards do seem to have been placed by a potato, so PA, who just hit this amazing timing with 14-minute Desolator, is not here. Well, why isn't she here? But then they initiate on Morphling with Willow's ultimate, and of all things, something he should be able to dodge with Waveform. He had vision. And now let's talk about the good. The first thing that impresses me is that Radiant recognizes that this fight is bad from the start and that they should disengage. It takes experience to know this early in the fight that it's screwed over, but you should at least run or reset before you consider going back in. I really like Pugna's performance in particular here. Even if he isn't great at keeping in formation, he does play around his cooldown and kites the opponent for long enough so that he ends up slowly killing them all. Your right clicks, they just don't matter very much as Pugna, so playing around like this is very nice. And although he wasn't here at the start, the PA does finally connect to the fight, picking up the Lifestealer kill, and also demonstrates that she knows how to play longer fights without hard committing. Radiant ends up winning this chaotic fight, but I would say Dire's big mistake here was not targeting the Pugna well enough. While Radiant had a really strong timing and kind of wasted it because their opener was so bad. That was their biggest mistake. The next fight I want to look at is at 1810. The initiation here is sloppy by Mars, but not only did Radiant have vision, they have all their heroes here as well, and they kept their formation really well. Everyone is where their heroes want to play in fights. Look, you got the backliners in the backliners, you got the front line in the front line. Meanwhile, the Jakiro is stuck in the arena right in front of Mars and he gets dunked on. Clean fight from the Radiant here. Let's skip ahead a few minutes. Dire just took Roche. Dark Willow died in an attempt to contest that Roshan, so let's see how Dire plays out this upcoming fight now that they have the big Aegis advantage. The initial approach is sloppy but pretty okay. The frontliners are in front, Zeus is far in the back, Jakiro a little questioning this position, but they see this Pugna and then they dive into an area with no vision at all. Their formation within their own team starts getting messed up a lot, and the Jakiro is way too close. Zeus is in the back hitting another ward and everything is falling apart rapidly. Dire supports die as well, and the Sand King just didn't even have to work for it. It didn't do anything, they just kind of killed themselves with this dive. The lesson here is that keeping your formation within your team is extremely important, even when you are ahead, especially when you are ahead really. You don't want to waste that potential gain you could have gotten with Aegis. I see these lower level teams, they get way overconfident with Aegis. It's better than doing nothing most of the time, sure, but throwing like this is terrible. As well, you need vision in these fights. If the Jakiro and Zeus circled around so that the Lifestealer and Morphling could be between them and the PA, then this fight goes way differently. If the Dire frontliners were gonna give up on the Pugna kill as soon as they realized they can't do it, that would have helped as well. The next two examples are something of a learning experience, and it shows how easy team fights are for either side when you manage to break up the positioning in a fight, and obviously mistakes as well make it a lot easier too. So at 25-35, Radiant takes position on a high ground very close to where the Willow was picked off. Oracle dewards the area to get vision so they could have a good place to fight in. Meanwhile, the Mars is walking into the fog alone into this area where Willow just died to 4 heroes. Probably not a safe place to be. Frontline is caught alone doing nothing. Oracle gets jumped because he's dewarding too close to the enemies and his Mars is dead, so the rest of them just get cleaned up in a matter of seconds. And on the flip side here, at around minute 28, Sand King gets caught out and a fight breaks out. Initially, it doesn't look that bad. Lifestealer infests to save him, which is a nice play. Gotta remember that heals now. And then they start backing out. But then the Dire supports walk way too close to the front line and they get caught in a 4-man arena. Everyone except Lifestealer gets destroyed and Radiant gets a chance to come back yet again. Which, again, I don't think the Radiant should have this chance to come back. They opted for builds that don't farm well. You've got Piped Mars and you've got no Battle Fury on PA, so they've kind of started to miss their timing. But builds don't really matter when you're making these giant mistakes. It's just positioning, vision, and skill. That's what affected this outcome here. It wasn't the items that really mattered. The items are fine, it's the execution that matters. You've got to be good enough to destroy the enemy teams when they make mistakes. You got to be able to capitalize on that. Your items determine how you want to play the game, and I think Radiant knew that they wanted to play aggressively, but ultimately their execution was just too bad, and well, I guess that's why they're Divine. But as you can see, I mean, if you're not Divine, it's not that hard. You guys can definitely do it. We got dozens and dozens of videos to help you do it, so please check those out. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe, and hit that follow button if you want to see all the new videos we got coming out for you. Have a nice day.